Dolly Parton's story began far from the bright lights of fame, in the middle of hardship and uncertainty. In 1967, a young woman arrived in Nashville carrying barely more than $20, a suitcase, and a dream nobody seemed to believe in. Music executives criticized her appearance, mocked her voice, and insisted she would never succeed in country music. Yet the same woman would eventually build a fortune worth hundreds of millions, write thousands of songs, and become one of the most admired entertainers in history. She rose from a tiny mountain cabin without electricity to worldwide fame. She transformed rejection into determination and gave the world timeless songs like Jolene, I Will Always Love You, and 9 to 5. But behind the sparkling outfits, towering wigs, and unforgettable smile was a life marked by pain, sacrifice, heartbreak, and emotional battles hidden from public view. How did a poor barefoot girl from rural Tennessee become an international icon? What did she lose while chasing success? Why did fame never fully erase the wounds she carried from childhood? And what nearly pushed her to walk away from everything at the height of her career? To understand those answers, you have to return to the beginning, to a childhood shaped by hunger, embarrassment, and poverty so severe it influenced every part of who she became. Dolly Rebecca Parton was born on January 19, 1946, in a small one-room cabin in Locust Ridge, Tennessee, deep inside the Smoky Mountains. She was the fourth of 12 children in a family that struggled constantly to survive. Poverty wasn't temporary for them. It was daily life. Her father, Robert Lee Parton, worked as a sharecropper and laborer despite being unable to read or write. He spent exhausting days working the land, yet the family still barely had enough to eat. Her mother, Avie Lee Parton, carried the emotional strength of the household. Even when there was little food, she comforted her children with songs and stories, trying to fill empty hearts and empty stomachs with love. The cabin had no electricity, no plumbing, and almost no protection against the harsh winters. 12 children crowded into a space far too small for the family. Several children shared the same bed beneath worn-out quilts made from scraps of fabric. During winter, frost gathered on the inside of the windows while the children slept in freezing air. Years later, Dolly would speak openly about those years. She explained that her family was desperately poor and often had almost nothing. But the hardest part wasn't simply lacking money, it was the shame attached to it. At school, Dolly became the child others whispered about. Her clothes were homemade, her shoes worn through with holes. She watched classmates wearing store-bought outfits while feeling painfully aware of how different she looked. She later admitted she didn't realize poverty was something to be ashamed of until she noticed the way people treated her. Children mocked her appearance and excluded her socially. Some laughed at her homemade dresses and treated her like she didn't belong. Even though teachers occasionally showed sympathy, the feeling of being less than stayed with her for years and deeply affected her confidence. Still, music became a source of hope inside that difficult life. Her mother sang Appalachian folk songs while cooking meals over a wood stove, and her grandfather, who preached at a Pentecostal church, filled services with passionate gospel music. Songs became one of the few things the family had in abundance. By the age of 7, Dolly was already writing lyrics of her own. She scribbled songs onto scraps of paper whenever she could find them. At 10 years old, she began performing on local radio stations around Knoxville. And by 13, she made an appearance at the Grand Ole Opry, standing nervously on stage in a homemade dress while trying to hide her fear. But success didn't instantly change her family's reality. Back home, there were still nights with barely enough food. Her father often sat quietly under the pressure of trying to provide for 12 children. Dolly remembered lying awake, promising herself she would someday escape the poverty surrounding her. She later explained that leaving wasn't about abandoning her family. She loved them deeply, but she believed staying would trap her forever in the same cycle of hardship. So immediately after graduating high school in 1964, she packed what little she owned into a suitcase and boarded a Greyhound bus to Nashville. She was only 18 years old, carrying a guitar, $20, and a belief that her voice mattered. Her childhood left emotional scars that never fully disappeared, but it also built incredible resilience inside her. By the time she arrived in Nashville, she had already survived more hardship than many people face in a lifetime. When Dolly reached Nashville, she believed talent and determination would be enough. She quickly discovered the music industry could be merciless. The city overflowed with dreamers chasing success, and most never made it. Dolly rented a tiny apartment crawling with roaches and struggled constantly to pay bills. Sometimes she survived on crackers, ketchup packets, and free food from diners because she simply couldn't afford proper meals. She visited record labels, radio stations, and publishing offices searching for opportunities. But rejection followed her everywhere. Executives mocked her appearance, criticized her heavy Southern accent, and dismissed her before hearing her sing. Some told her she was too country. Others said her voice was too high or her songs too simple. Each rejection reopened insecurities she had carried since childhood. There were nights she sat alone wondering if everyone was right about her. Maybe she truly didn't belong in Nashville. But Dolly refused to stop trying. She worked odd jobs, recorded demos for other artists, and continued writing songs constantly. Music became both her ambition and her emotional escape. In 1966, Monument Records finally offered her a contract. The deal wasn't ideal. The label paid little and controlled much of her career, but it represented an opportunity she couldn't ignore. Her first single, Dumb Blonde, arrived in 1967 and became a modest hit. The song challenged stereotypes and introduced audiences to her personality and confidence. For the first time, people were beginning to recognize her name. Still, the success came with frustration. The label pushed her toward pop music and tried to reshape her image into something more marketable. Dolly often felt pressured to become someone other than herself. Even as her music gained attention, financial security remained uncertain. Contracts heavily favored the label, and despite chart success, she still struggled financially. Loneliness also followed her. Nashville was crowded with people chasing success, but meaningful trust felt rare. Dolly missed her family, the mountains, and the simplicity of home. At times, she seriously considered giving up and returning to Tennessee. She imagined marrying locally and living a quiet life away from the pressure of the music business. Then, her life changed when country star Porter Wagoner entered the picture. Porter was already famous thanks to his television show and flashy stage presence. In 1967, he needed a new female singer for his program after another performer departed. Dolly was recommended for the role. Porter immediately recognized her talent and charisma. He offered her a spot on his nationally televised show, giving her exposure she desperately needed. The opportunity launched her career, but it also created new problems she never anticipated. At first, appearing on the Porter Wagoner show felt like a dream. Millions of viewers watched them perform together weekly, and audiences loved their chemistry. Dolly's popularity rose rapidly, but behind the scenes, the relationship became controlling. Porter didn't simply guide her career, he increasingly controlled it. He dictated how she dressed, what songs she recorded, and how she behaved publicly. Dolly initially trusted his experience, believing he knew what was best. Over time, that trust became suffocating. Contracts tied her tightly to Porter's management. He controlled important business decisions and received significant portions of her earnings. Many songs she loved were rejected because Porter preferred different material. Dolly later admitted she often felt more like property than a creative partner. As a songwriter, she desperately wanted artistic freedom, but Porter expected loyalty and obedience. Their disagreements became frequent and emotionally draining. Arguments erupted backstage and during recording sessions. Porter could be generous one moment and harsh the next, constantly reminding Dolly how much she supposedly owed him. The emotional strain became overwhelming. Publicly, she smiled beside him on television, but privately she felt trapped and exhausted. Still, she continued writing songs late at night, pouring her frustrations into lyrics. One of those songs eventually became I Will Always Love You. Contrary to popular belief, the song wasn't originally written as a romantic breakup. It was Dolly's emotional farewell to Porter Wagoner and the complicated relationship they shared. By 1974, after years of tension, Dolly finally decided she had to leave. She sang the song for Porter privately, explaining through music that she needed independence. The moment deeply affected him, but eventually he agreed to release her from the partnership, though not without financial consequences. Dolly had to borrow money and fight legally to regain full control of her career. The experience left permanent emotional scars, but it also strengthened her determination never to surrender her freedom again. Once independent, Dolly's career exploded. She released I Will Always Love You in 1974, and it became a massive success. Audiences connected with its honesty and vulnerability. Soon afterward came a string of legendary songs, including Jolene, Here You Come Again, and 9 to 5. Each success pushed her beyond country music into mainstream global fame. 9 to 5 especially became an anthem for working people everywhere. The song's success, combined with her role in the film alongside Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin, proved Dolly could dominate both music and Hollywood. She became more than a country artist. She became a cultural icon. But the pressure of maintaining that success was exhausting. Dolly constantly worked, terrified that slowing down would cause everything to disappear. Behind the glamorous image, she struggled with anxiety, emotional exhaustion, and lingering insecurity from her past. During the 1980s, she expanded into business, creating her own production company and securing ownership over her music rights, a rare achievement for a female artist at that time. Then came one of her boldest ideas, Dollywood. In 1986, she opened the theme park near the Smoky Mountains where she grew up. Critics mocked the idea, assuming it would fail quickly. Instead, Dollywood became one of America's most successful regional theme parks, bringing jobs and tourism back to East Tennessee. For Dolly, it wasn't only about business. It was about helping the community that raised her. Even as her empire grew, private struggles continued. Her marriage to Carl Dean remained mysterious to the public. Carl avoided fame completely, rarely appearing beside her despite decades together. Dolly later admitted her career often kept them apart for long periods. She loved Carl deeply, but balancing marriage with nonstop work created emotional strain and guilt. Eventually, the pressure of fame, work, and emotional exhaustion led Dolly into severe depression during the 1980s. She later revealed that she experienced moments of hopelessness so intense she questioned whether she wanted to continue living. One day, during a particularly dark period, she sat alone contemplating ending her life. But the presence of her beloved dog interrupted the moment and emotionally grounded her. That experience became a turning point. Dolly sought therapy, support, and treatment while slowly rebuilding her mental health. She later spoke honestly about learning that strength and vulnerability can exist together. Throughout those struggles, Carl remained quietly supportive, giving her stability without demanding attention or control. Despite emotional pain, Dolly never stopped working. Music remained both her burden and her therapy. Public criticism also followed her constantly. For decades, critics mocked her appearance, treating her like a joke instead of recognizing her intelligence and talent. Many focused only on her exaggerated image while ignoring her songwriting and business accomplishments. Dolly understood exactly what she was doing with her public persona. She intentionally created a larger-than-life image and used humor to disarm critics. Still, the mockery hurt. She faced criticism from both the entertainment industry and parts of the feminist movement, with some accusing her of reinforcing stereotypes. Dolly responded by refusing to apologize for being herself. Meanwhile, tabloids spread endless rumors about her marriage and personal life. She protected her privacy fiercely, rarely allowing public speculation to change how she lived. In the 1990s, body shaming became another painful chapter. Weight gain triggered cruel headlines and public ridicule. Dolly admitted emotional stress sometimes led her to seek comfort in food, and the criticism intensified her pain. But once again, she responded with resilience, humor, and reinvention, rather than bitterness. Professionally, she proved doubters wrong repeatedly. By owning her publishing rights, she later earned millions when Whitney Houston recorded I Will Always Love You for The Bodyguard. That success became one of the clearest examples of Dolly's intelligence as both an artist and businesswoman. Over time, public opinion shifted. People began recognizing her not only as an entertainer, but as a brilliant songwriter, entrepreneur, and philanthropist. Still, personal loss continued to shape her life. She lost siblings, close friends, and eventually both parents. Each death reopened emotional wounds tied to childhood and family. The deaths of her brothers Larry and Floyd deeply affected her, especially because fame often kept her physically distant during important moments. The loss of Kenny Rogers also devastated her. Their friendship went far beyond music, and mourning him during the pandemic without attending his funeral added another layer of heartbreak. Perhaps the most painful losses were those of her parents. Her father's death left Dolly grieving not only the loss itself, but years of emotional distance and unspoken feelings. She always longed more openly for his approval and affection. Her mother's passing shattered her completely. Avie Lee had been her emotional foundation since childhood, the woman who filled difficult years with love and music. After her mother died, Dolly retreated from public life temporarily, overwhelmed by grief. Yet even through loss, she continued channeling pain into songs and storytelling. Music remained her way of surviving heartbreak. As she grew older, Dolly increasingly focused on giving back. In 1995, she created the Imagination Library, a program providing free books to children. What began locally eventually expanded internationally, delivering millions of books worldwide. For Dolly, literacy represented opportunity, something she wished every child could have regardless of poverty. She also helped communities devastated by the 2016 Tennessee wildfires by providing direct financial assistance to affected families. During the COVID-19 pandemic, she quietly donated $1 million toward medical research that contributed to vaccine development. Unlike many celebrities, Dolly rarely sought attention for charity work. Helping others mattered more to her than publicity. Her generosity extended across countless causes, including education, disaster relief, healthcare, and equality initiatives. Even now, she remains committed to treating people with compassion, regardless of politics, identity, or background. At nearly 80 years old, Dolly continues writing music, managing businesses, and supporting charitable work. She often says she may not have children of her own, but she feels connected to millions of children helped through her programs. Today, Dolly Parton is celebrated not only because of her fame, but because she never forgot where she came from. She remembers the hunger, embarrassment, loneliness, and rejection that shaped her childhood, and she spends her life trying to ease those struggles for others. Her story was never simply about becoming famous. It was about surviving hardship without losing kindness. It was about turning pain into purpose. It was about proving that a girl from a tiny cabin in the mountains could change the world without forgetting the people still struggling behind her. Dolly Parton's life reminds people that success means little without compassion, and that true legacy comes not from what you keep, but from what you give away. She endured rejection, heartbreak, depression, criticism, and loss, yet she continued creating, helping, and inspiring. And perhaps that is why her story continues to resonate so deeply. Because beyond the fame, the songs, and the glittering image, Dolly Parton represents resilience, the ability to suffer, heal, and still choose kindness anyway.